I'm very happy to be here today with you, and also I'm very honored for the chance to take part of this wonderful project. I'd like especially thank Marika and the Art On Foundation for initiating this project, and for inviting the Art Museum of Estonia to cooperate in it. Marika, thank you for your patience, for your inspiration and encouragement. And we from the museum side are also very grateful for all the partners for this fruitful cooperation. It truly has been an inspiring journey. So at the current phase of the project, Art Museum of Estonia is the only participating museum. From the beginning of the application process, the museum took the participation as a chance to introduce its collection and to position it in a wider cultural context. Thereby, the selection of the works included to the database is slowly based on the collection of our museum. This choice, of course, had an impact of the Estonian contribution within the project, as by all means, not all the seminal works from Estonian avant-garde are included into our collection. There is still a noteworthy amount of research to be done in the archives and collections of other memory institutions and also in artist private archives. In my presentation, I will give a short overview how the post-war avant-garde art has found its way into the biggest art collection in Estonia. As the main focus of Forgotten Heritage project is on the 1960s, 1970s, I will shortly describe the cultural and political milieu of these decades in Estonia, and also describe under which circumstances the museum and artists had to operate. I will point out several turning points in the timeline of the museum's existence that have influenced the acquisition process and the collection of the museum. But firstly, some plain facts about the Art Museum of Estonia. It is located in Tallinn, and it was founded almost 100 years ago in 1919. By now, we have 5 different branches. The main building, Kumu Art Museum, was opened in 2006 as the first space in Estonia built especially for the needs of the art museum. Our scientific research is being done on a wide time scale from the Middle Ages up until the present day. The collection is quite big. We have 60,000 artworks in our holdings. In all, it can be said that Art Museum of Estonia functions as most of the national art museums nowadays. We have our own collection and acquisition policy. We have curated exhibition and education programs. But it has not always been the case. In the hindsight to the 1960s, 1970s, the situation was much more complicated. The art life in general was strictly coordinated and managed by the Artists' Union, Artists' Foundation, and the Ministry of Culture of Estonian SSSR. As Estonia was under the Soviet occupation at that time, the instructions and guidelines were received from the central bodies in Moscow and the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Estonia. Artists' Union played the key role in the life of a Soviet Estonian artist. Membership of this union gave the member a legal right and possibility to be a freelancer. The board of the Artists' Union distributed the permissions for organizing the exhibitions, vouchers for foreign trips, studios and flats, etc. Economic activities of the system were managed by the Art Foundation that built studios, distributed grants, sold work tools and materials, which were scarce at that time, and those of the highest demand were sold only on the basis of distribution list compiled by the officials. In all, officials, having a lot of power under the condition of limited possibilities, solved problems, kept correspondence with Moscow, reacted to the directives, made plans, and wrote reports. At the time when the life of creative individual was highly regulated on the official level, there was a tendency of forming artist collectives and groupings who did not operate on public territory, but instead in artist studios and inner cycles. Within these circles, the philosophy of art and the developments in art and culture behind the other side of the Iron Curtain were often discussed. One of the first artist collectives in Soviet Estonia, ANC 64, was formed in 1964, and several its members influenced the non-official art scene in Estonia in following decades. Another seminal group of artists without whom the story of Estonian neo-avant-garde would not be the same is SOUP 69, which was formed by the students of industrial design at the State Art Institute of the Estonian SSR. Parallel activity to officially regulated art life also took place outside of Tallinn. Pisarid was one of the examples. Pisarid was a collective formed by Kaljo Põllu at the art cabinet of Tartu University. Tartu is the second biggest town in Estonia. Social optimism that rose during Khrushchev, though, the hope for the liberalization of the system, disappeared after the events in Prague, 1968. Gradually, the activity of above-mentioned collective initiatives of young artists, which had increased in the middle of the 1960s, faded away. In a way, the activities of non-official art scene took another form. The very same people who were active in the 1960s started to organize exhibitions on alternative spaces that had no approval from the officials. Officially, the exhibition activities in Soviet Estonia were carried out on the basis of plans confirmed by the Artist Union and the Council of the Ministry of Culture. Exhibitions like Saku 73 and Harku 75 both were events organized by artists themselves and took place outside of the premises operated by the Artist Union and Ministry of Culture. The scientific institutions often offered spaces for alternative art exhibition at that time. Saku 73 was initiated largely by the same people who played pivotal role in the circles of non-official art in the previous decade. The main participants were the members of ANC 64 group, and the exhibition served as both a statement about their attitude and a summary of their work. So here are some slides about the exhibition and the artists next to their own works. Two years later, another similar exhibition took place close to Tallinn, and it was called Harku 75. This event is considered to have been the last unofficial show in Soviet Estonia. The exhibition itself, like unofficial shows in general, was eclectic and presented such diverse trends as pop art, along with the most influential developments in Estonian alternative art since the late 1960s: kinetic objects, concrete poetry, and geometric abstraction. In the late 1960s, the Artists' Union itself set up a small room on the third floor of the Tallinn Art Hall to enable artists whose works had been rejected from official exhibitions to show their work. Access to these exhibitions was technically open to all, but since one could enter the space only through the premises of the Artists' Union, the wider public was automatically excluded. The exhibitions were approved by the Board of Artists' Union functionaries, so these exhibitions can be considered as a semi-official events. Obviously, this was an attempt by the functionaries to be as liberal as possible and avoid splitting of art into official and the underground, avoiding at the same time the scandals. So here I have brought out two important exhibitions on that space. In 1973, Leonard Lapin's exhibition, and in 1976, Jüri Oka's solo exhibition, and one exhibition view for the latter exhibition. In the 1970s, the exhibitions like Saku's and Harku and the small exhibitions on the Tallinn Art Hall third floor formed the considerable opposition movement in the art life at that time. At the time, the official exhibition activities in Soviet Union were carried out on the basis of plans confirmed by the Artists' Union and Council of the Ministry of Culture. The very same institutions regulated also art acquisitions and commissions, which were the main financial source of income for the artists. The Ministry of Culture distributed its acquisitions made on the rather conservative principles, mainly between the collections of two national art museums, Art Museum of Estonia in Tallinn and Tartu Art Museum in the second biggest town in Estonia. The museums themselves did not have any freedom to compile their collections regarding the new art. Nevertheless, they had some right to decide about heritage art. Additional to the museums, art was also officially purchased to the state, to the Art Foundation collection, and it had more liberal acquisition policy than the one for the museums. Therefore, paintings by young artists were also purchased, and also including abstract ones that actually were not officially favored. But still, it was more as an exception. The acquisition policy of Art Foundation and art museums did not follow from the interest of collection. It rather depended on the official evaluation criteria, playing at the same time the role of financial support for the artist. As the capacity of the storage space of the Art Foundation was limited, but sums assigned to acquisitions were big, the foundation regularly got rid of the old part, giving preference to museums while choosing the recipient. Thanks to that, some examples of more radical art of that period also found their way to museums' collections. This was one possible way how Art Museum of Estonia was able to acquire artworks that did not receive the official favoring, but it was still a rare occasion. Apart from this way of receiving additions of new art to the collection, there were personal contacts between some of the museum professionals and artists who belonged to the non-official art circles. It is known that some of the active artists at that time deposited some of their works to the museum. It is still a question for further research under which circumstances this activity could take place. Certainly, it demanded a level of braveness and openness from the museum administration to accept this action. It is known that some of the works by Raul Meel, Leonard Lapin, and Tõnis Vint were handed over to the museum as deposits. Later, as the political atmosphere loosened, these works were acquired from the artists. And there was also a possibility for an artist to donate the artwork to the museum collection. And in this case, the procedure did not have to go through the censorships that accompanied purchases. However, this was, again, not a frequent occasion. In all, it could be said that the post-war avant-garde and experimental art that was not approved by the official functionaries rarely found its way to the national art collection during the Soviet regime. The situation regarding the collection and acquisition policy in the museum changed drastically after Estonia regained its independence in 1991. Finally, both national art museums in Tallinn and Tartu could decide independently how to complement their collections. In 1991, the museum's expertise and purchase committees were created in both museums, and even if the financial resources for new acquisitions were low, this chance brought new level of autonomy and freedom. In addition, in 1995, a new financial body was created, Estonian Cultural Endowment, that finances the acquisition of artworks from living artists. Also, works from the 1960s and 70s can be purchased straight from the artists. In the 1990s, there were numerous of exhibitions initiated by the artists themselves that revealed their creative experiments from their earlier years. These displays inspired the art historians to write new chapters into the Estonian art history. For example, an exhibition by Kalju Põllu in 1994 presented his earlier works from 60s and 70s that the wider art public had never seen. Now, several of these op and kinetic artworks are part of our permanent display at Kumu Art Museum. Just to give you some statistics to speak for itself, how the situation changed after 1991. Here are 3 important names from Estonian post-war avant-garde, and these numbers show how their legacy has reached in our collection. For example, we have around 600 artworks from Raul Meel, and only 42 of them were acquired before 1991. After the building for Kumu Art Museum was opened in 2006, the post-war avant-garde art found its honorable position in our permanent display. Also, during the years, numerous of research-based exhibitions on the overall key figures of Estonian avant-garde have taken place in Kumu. After these exhibitions, there has been acquisitions to our collection directly from these artists or from their relatives. So here I have pointed out only a selection of those exhibitions. And here are some exhibition views. So the research of the non-official art from the Soviet Estonia is an ongoing process. A project like Forgotten Heritage contributes for this art historical research. Our hope for the future regarding the repository is that it will become possible to include works from other Estonian collections and archives in order to present more complete story of Estonian post-war avant-garde. Also, it would be fascinating to compare the art languages within Soviet Union. For primarily the relations with our Baltic neighbors, Latvia and Lithuania, who have similar historical background as Estonia. So thank you very much for your attention.